So for my next project, I had this dusty, realistic LAB-430 turntable from Radio Shack, probably also made by CEC, so it's a nice Japanese-made turntable, but it's not quite as sturdy as some of the upper-level models. I understand this was from 1985, and I bought this very cheaply, and the seller in the description, and also included a video, said that as soon as you put the stylus down on the record, it just skidded straight across. And I read that and I knew right away 100% what the problem was. Went and picked it up, plopped it in the car, got home. As soon as I took it out of the car, I realized I was wrong. The reason that I thought it was that it was missing the stylus, and then that stylus not being in the groove, nothing would keep it in one place. I'd seen that before. But while the stylus on this is quite bad, the real reason is this. It's missing the counterweight on the tone arm, and that's a problem. Okay, so here are some counterweights from some other turntables. So the hole in the middle, as well as its overall weight, are the important considerations. So this one is from another realistic turntable, the LAB-430, which only one model number away, you'd think, well, that would fit, but it doesn't. The hole is too big. As the hole on this Audio-Technica one is too small, the hole on this Techniques one is way too big, but this one is from a Sanyo turntable, and this seems to fit just fine. So before we get too deeply into this, let's see if it works. So it's plugged in, move the tone arm over, and hooray, it works. If you look at the speed though, it's running quite fast on 33. It's the second band from the bottom. When I try to adjust it, it will adjust, but it's not staying stable. It's speeding up, slowing down, jumping around. So that's a problem too, and it may make this turntable not worth fixing. This turntable is quite a bit flimsier than other models, even ones with fiberboard base I've used, and these feet are in quite poor shape, so something will need to be done about those if this turntable is worth fixing. So I've taken the screws out, lifted it off, and here we go. So things don't look too bad in here. So the pitch fader is right here on the other side, and it also connects here, of course, to the main board with the motor. And there's two small holes here and here, which may be speed controls. So the first thing to do is to clean the contacts in this pitch fader, and if these are also master pitch faders, to do that as well. And sometimes that does clear up the problem. So I'm about to void the warranty on my turntable by breaking the tamper seal on these nuts. So I got the motor board out and the pitch fader out, and sure enough, these are two speed controls, so that's good news. The motor is actually quite tiny compared to other direct drive turntables I've worked on, and we have the pitch fader here. So we're going to see what we can do with those. So the product I'm going to use is called Deoxit. This is an electrical contact cleaner. So what I'm going to do is spray it into these potentiometers while I give them a little turn back and forth to work out any dirt or corrosion that might be in there. Thankfully, I did unplug the turntable this time before starting to work on it. So this potentiometer has some little openings in it that you can try to squirt Deoxit into. So while I'm under here, might as well check and see if the motor can be serviced. Yes, it is pulled off, so I can clean this up with a Q-tip and relubricate that too. So I've cleaned and relubed the motor. I used a little bit of WD-40 as a solvent here, cleaned all that out with a Q-tip, and relube it with 3-in-1 electric motor oil. Now, before I put this back together, I'm going to try to center these controls. So from here to here, from here to here, so I'm going to put that right in the middle. And the same with the other one, from here to here, put that right in the middle. So that should give us a starting point. We'll do the same with the pitch fader once we put it back together. Okay, so we've got our turntable back together and upright. So I'm going to also center this secondary pitch fader as well. So I'm going to turn it all the way to the left, and about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strokes to the right is lock to lock. So 1, 2 and a half should get us to about center. That's a good starting place for adjusting the speed, with both the master ones underneath and this one being centered. Now, adjusting them is not going to be too easy. So this turntable, I was not able to find a service manual for it. But these are the 2 holes right here. So you're going to need a stubby little screwdriver to get under here. So on my little jacks here, I've got some space here. So you need to be very careful about what you touch. So the nearer of those 2 pitch faders turned out to be the 33 one. And by turning it back and forth with some trial and error, I was able to get the speed relatively stable. Again, the pitch fader on the front of the turntable is still centered, so I can make some fine adjustments. I'm going to do the same thing with the 45. Some turntables, if I had the manual, some say adjust one of these speeds first and then the other. I'm not sure what to do with this one, so we'll just see what works. So that's way better than it was. Both speeds seem to be pretty stable. It may be worth it to go through and do another second round of deoxit on both the primary and secondary pitch fader. Also notice when I touch the switch, even just a little bit, there's a middle off position and speeds to either side. It seemed to vary a little bit, so I might take it apart again and deoxit that switch to clean those contacts as well. So I threw a cartridge on it just to confirm that the Sanyo counterweight is going to be heavy enough to give us a good result here, and it seems that way. So before I go and spend any money on parts for this, I'm going to make sure it actually makes some sound, and test its other functions. So what I've done here is I've balanced the tone arm so it's just there freely. The cueing lever is down. So I'm going to test the anti-skate, which is currently set at 0 right there. So as I turn it up, because the arm is floating freely, as I turn the knob, it should move toward the outer edge as that anti-skating force is applied. So let's see if it works. It works really well. So that's another thing that we don't have to fix. So the turntable is cleaned up pretty well with the antibacterial wipes, and noticed a few things. And the RCA cables, I cleaned the length of the RCA, and the power cables are not in good shape. They're actually almost rusty. So this is a semi-automatic turntable, meaning manual start and automatic stop. So I'm going to start it up. And one thing which definitely is going to need some attention is this cue. It's going to drop way too quickly. But let's see what it sounds like. There isn't very much hum. And I'd have to say this sounds just fine. We look at the speed. Huge improvement there. Very stable now with our deoxit treatment of the potentiometers. So that is a good result. So now that we know that the turntable is going to sound fine when all is said and done, we can press on with fixing some of the other issues. So let's start with the cueing. So first you need to figure out how this actually works. So I press the cue button. There's a slider here, and we have a rod that goes up here, and mechanism here. So I don't see anything here that would affect the damping of it. So I'll flip it over and see what we can find there. So to slow the drop of the tone arm, most turntables rely on something called silicone damping fluid. So I bought this from a place called Turntable Basics. This comes in different viscosities or thicknesses. So this is 300,000 CST, which is, I think, kind of average. This is the only kind that I have, though. So since I didn't see anything underneath, sometimes you apply it by putting it between two metal parts. I think it's possible that the damping fluid may go in from the top here. So to take out this screw, remove this arm, and put the damping fluid in there. So I remove the arm, which also has a little spring inside of it. Here's the screw. And here's the shaft. You can see if we push the cueing button, that goes up and down. So putting anything in this hole at the top really wouldn't be helpful. But where the damping would occur, I think, is around the edge. So believe it or not, that's probably where I'm going to put that in, the fluid, and that gooey viscousness is what's going to damp the movement of the tone arm. So with the cueing lever up, I just put a little bit on there, worked it in with a Q-tip. You can see that is definitely making a difference. I'm going to work it a little bit here, and then let gravity take over before I put it back together. So I let that damping fluid seep in around the shaft overnight, and that is a huge improvement, both up and down. So with that working, let's source some parts for our turntable, starting with the counterweight. I know that the Sanyo will fit, so if I search for Sanyo, I'm not going to search for the exact number. I'm going to search for plus, which is the series turntable. Has 63 results. Let's sort by price, lowest to highest, and there we go. One strategy you can use is if you add it to your favorites list, the seller will see that and sometimes offer you a better price on the item. So I'm going to do that for this one and keep going. So that here's another one. Here's a almost $35 here. So I'm going to add the cheapest ones to my wish list, wait a few hours and see if anything happens. So the feet on our turntable are completely shot, so we need to replace those. Something I've used successfully in the past are these sorbethane isolation domes. Sorbethane is a very squishy type of synthetic rubber, and these are made by a company called Soundrise. You can buy many different configurations of these, different diameters of them, and in particular there's a measurement called the durometer, or duro. So the lower the number, the softer and squishier they are. The higher the number, the firmer they are. So if you're going to suspend something that's heavier, you're going to want to use a denser, higher durometer dome. But I've used these specific ones in the past on a number of turntables. So here it says right here they're 20 durometer, and this is not a very heavy turntable. So these will work very well for that. So here's our turntable in the 1985 Radio Shack catalog. So we're now well into the CD era by a few years, and it seems like the turntable market is declining. Some higher end models that they had previously, like the LAB-430, had disappeared. The only two models better than this in Radio Shack's catalog are linear trackers, which is not a bad thing, but this is their otherwise highest end turntable. And to see what this is in today's money, we'll go to the BLS inflation calculator. So $130 in 1985 is now
$387.
So I have the parts I need, starting with the counterweight. So I added this to my watch list on eBay, and the seller did offer a better price. I was able to get that pretty reasonably. I have a new set of RCA cables, not new, but new to this turntable, that are much better. We have our protective feet, and I'm going to use a Stanton 500 cartridge, which is very low mass and therefore a good fit for this ultra low mass tone arm, with an excellent quality replacement elliptical stylus, which will be a very good fit for this. So I'm just going to slice off these old rubber feet and in their place put these sound rise domes. They're basically peel and stick, so I'll stick them in the exact same place. So I'm going to unsolder the old RCA cables, including the ground, taking care to stay away from the very delicate tone arm wires, and solder the newer ones in their place. And this turntable works well and is pretty clean, but while I'm underneath, I'm going to give it just a general cleanup with some Q-tips on the plastic parts and lubricate it with some Super Lube silicone grease. So here are two different versions of installation instructions for Stanton cartridges. This is the older of the two. It indicates that there are 3 ways of installing your cartridge. The first is with no spacer, but with a thin piece of blue plastic that basically holds the screws in place while you put the nuts on. So I do have one of those, but I don't think it's necessary. So the other two provide more space between the cartridge and the head shell, either to improve your vertical tracking angle or to provide isolation between the metal of the cartridge and the metal of the head shell. So I've never actually seen a white one. The black one, the screws come in from the top and then thread into the insert. But a newer version of the Stanton instructions shows, instead of 1 piece black spacer, these 2 pieces that slide onto the sides. So I do have some of these, but they're extremely rare, almost impossible to find being sold. And I don't think we need the additional height nor the isolation between the cartridge and the head shell, because the head shell is made of plastic. So I'm going to hold on to those and not use those to mount the cartridge. So to mount the cartridge, there's no need to use screws that are any longer than necessary. And on the Stanton cartridge, you don't want them to contact the side of the cartridge as they come through. So we can use screws. These 2 are about the right length, but this one is made of steel. This one is made of aluminum. So for lighter weight, I'm going to use the aluminum ones. So what I usually do is take a plastic washer, on the screw, put that through the head shell like this, then the cartridge like this. Then I like to use a metal washer underneath here, just to give it some added support, and then finally the nut, and also I'm going to be using aluminum nuts. So I've reattached the base. The turntable is back on its own 4 little feet. I've installed and aligned the cartridge. I showed how to align the cartridge in a different video, which I'll link to, so I won't do it again here. Did a sound check, and it all sounds great. So that was a fun project, sourcing parts and fixing the speed problem. This is a very respectable turntable, not high-end, but well-made and reliable. I don't think too many turntables made today will still be doing what they're supposed to do 39 years later. So good job, Radio Shack, on this one.